Welcome to another edition of Your Right to Know with Tony DeFazio of DeFazio and Ziden. And today we are talking about the loss of a very powerful, instrumental player in the justice court system, and that is Antonin Scalia, who just passed away recently. There's been a lot of talk about what he's done. What are we going to miss about him?
Well, he was the longest-serving justice on the Supreme Court. First Italian-American justice, came on in the 80s, was a Ronald Reagan appointee. And he was kind of the leader of the conservatives, the big mouth of the conservatives. He was the one that was telling them, he had a position about the Constitution, which was, he thought it was, and he used to say these words, it was that the Constitution was dead. And he didn't mean that there wasn't any importance in the Constitution. What he meant was that the Constitution was what it was when it was written. It is not some living, breathing document that changes over time. It's the same. And if you have a problem with it, you should amend it. But when you look at the Constitution, you look at what it means, you should look at the people who wrote it at that time. And so that was he was called a strict constructionist. And that was what he always did over the last 30 years when he was a judge. And the reason that he did that was he believed that the courts and the Supreme Court was not there really to make law, to change the law. It was really there just to interpret the law. It was for the legislature and the president to make new law. It was just their job to interpret it. And so by doing that, he fought against the forces of change that really started, I think, in the 70s, when you had more activist judges who were going to reinterpret constitutional provisions and make new law and make new rights that he didn't believe was there.
So what will we miss from someone with that kind of influence?
Well, besides the fact that his bravado and his questions were all on the bench, he was a very active person. I think there's one area that is not really being talked about, but where he actually did believe in individual rights. He believed in the rights of people be protected from the government, against the government. And there are two areas that he made an impact. The first is, in spite of the fact that there's been changes in the law and changes in interpretation of Fourth Amendment and about search and seizure, he always was strict on this one principle that when you're in your home, you have a right to be protected from the government. The only way that anybody can come and search your home or arrest you in your home is if they go get an actual search warrant or an arrest warrant. That's rarely done on other things these days. If you're on the street, if you're in your car, routinely courts look away from warrant. But he was pretty strict on the warrant requirement, always up until the end in all his cases. The second area, which kind of came out of nowhere in 2008, is his decision on the Second Amendment, where he wrote in a majority opinion, 2008, that people have the right to bear arms, that they have the right to own guns. And that had never been really the law of the land. Even though people had always said, we have a right to bear arms, we have the Second Amendment, it was not the holding of any court that, in fact, they had that right. But in 2008, the court struck down the blanket prohibition of the ownership of guns in Washington, D.C., and in other parts of the country. So people have a right to own rifles, to own shotguns. And if there's going to be some restrictions, now, of course, he does allow for restrictions, types of guns and certain types of carry permits. Mm-hmm. He never said that you couldn't have that, but as a general rule, people have that right. And that's something that he is going to be remembered for, and he's certainly going to be missed.
Did you admire him? Did you like him? Did you believe in what he was doing?
Well, I like what he did. I did like a lot of his opinions. I think, unfortunately, the court has become very ideological because there's been this almost a stagnation in the Congress and the presidency, and nothing can get done. Everybody's always now looking to the courts to fix the problems. Mm-hmm. And so now you've got courts that are making essentially political decisions instead of making legal decisions. And because of that, you're having these ideological battles, and the battle for the next Supreme Court justice is going to be a very hard-fought one, a very hard-fought political battle. Mm-hmm. And that's not what this was supposed to be about, and that's not what judges are supposed to do. So I think they've been thrown into this position because of that, and as a result, I think there's a taint on the courts because they've had to become so political.
Yeah, right. Well, good information, and thanks for giving us some insight into Judge Scalia and some of the other things that you might not have known about the judge that recently passed. And that will do it for this edition of Your Right to Know. This is Tony DeFazio of DeFazio and Ziden. We will see you next time.